All right, everybody, welcome to another session of reading some theory. Today we are reading Bordiga. Yes, we're taking the meme seriously. People tell us, read Bordiga, we're going to read Bordiga. Even if you haven't, and the people who tell us to read him probably haven't too. So, this is me, AW, Hyperion, Joshua, and Chaya. So, what are we reading? We're reading a couple sections from Bordiga's The Fundamentals for a Marxist Orientation. Basically, his version, I suppose, of like Trotsky's ABC of materialist dialectics and Stalin's materialist dialectics. And who else was it? Oh, yeah, and Mao's on contradiction, or his stuff on materialist dialectics too. Let's see if he does any better. So far, I've noticed a trend that most of them actually say the same things and don't really do much of a better job. So there's one section I definitely want to read because it has to be the most important section, the section on method. So that's somewhere a little bit down the page. Second section, this is going to be linked in the bottom on the about of the video. But let's see. Does Bordiga think this is about dialectics? And if so, is it actually dialectical? That is the question. What was it? Didn't you come up with a name like that, like Chaya, for like doing some sort of like reading series? Like, is it dialectics or something?
Yeah, I can't believe it's not dialectics.
Yeah. I won't believe it's not dialectics.
We have to red pill the normies on dialectics.
Just gotta go through all these people claiming to be doing dialectics and just go, is it dialectics? Nope.
Nope.
I think we've got a pink pill the normies on dialectics,
Oh boy.
if you know what I'm saying.
I don't.
Nope. You gonna say something?
Well, is it dialectics, but more importantly, does it matter? Does it say anything important?
Yeah, true. I mean, at least I think from Mao and even from Trotsky, we get a sense of this pragmatic contextualism, which that's actually good. There's something positive there. It just can be said in a much clearer way and in much less text. But all right, the method. Starting. I assume this is base 6, not basins. That doesn't make sense. The basins of all investigation must be a consideration of the historic process. Yeah, I think that's basis.
Yeah,
the basis of all investigation must be consideration of the historic process as a whole, its development till now, and an objective examination of present social phenomena. All right. This method has been well stated often, but frequently as misleading in regard to its application. The fundamentals of the investigation of the material means by which human groupings satisfy their needs, that is, by an examination of productive technique, and in connection with the development of which economic relations arise. In the course of different epochs, these factors determine the superstructure composed of the legal institutions, political, military, and dominant ideologies. Or, it's the laws that makes the mode of production sometimes. But we'll see. He has a section later on specifically about that, so we'll wait to see what he says. Continuing, the contradiction between the productive forces and the social forms manifests itself as a struggle between the classes who have antagonistic economic interests. In the final stages, the struggle becomes the armed struggle for the conquest of political power. So that's a bit interesting. Usually people just note the contradiction between the forces of production and the relations of productions as something technical. You know, like, what was it that Marx said? You know, the steam engine gives you capitalism, I forget what it was that gave you feudalism, but it probably had something to do with a scythe and wheat. But that's how I usually understand that dialectic, not in this sense of it's the class struggle.
Or in the sense of everything kind of converges at the political realm. Like, I guess it kind of depends on how you conceptualize the state, though. Maybe I'm misreading this, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go and reread the parts of the German ideology that go over this, because I looked at those very briefly long ago, so I'm not quite sure what the contradictions fully are anymore. But okay. Continuing, this method is denoted by the following expressions: historic materialism, dialectical materialism, economic determinism, scientific materialism, and communist critique. The important thing is always to apply the results to the facts and not a priori postulates, to clarify and explain human phenomena, not to myths or divinities, not to principles of right or natural ethics, such as justice, equality, fraternity, and other abstractions similar to them devoid of any sense. Most important, one must not capitulate to the pressure of the dominant ideology, or take refuge in illusory postulates. Without a clear perception, or without acknowledging it, when action intervenes anew, just at the most burning moments and at the instant of decisive conclusions. The dialectic method is the only one which overcomes the current contradictions between continuity and rigorous theoretical coherence on one hand, and on the other hand, the capacity to face critically old established conclusions in formal terms.
This sounds like the typical Marxist claim that dialectics explain everything because it isn't ethical.
Yeah, it's subjective, and so they don't take it to be an ethical critique. You know, it's just, admittedly, it's the thing that actually drew me originally to Marxism. This disdain of ethics. I was tired of ethics because of anarchism. You know, anarchism was mainly a moralist critique, and seeing as moralist critiques seem to convince nobody and cause nothing to change, I was far more interested in more receptive to claims of, well, you know, we're not saying this because it's wrong, but because, you know, it's just the way things are going to go. So, yeah, usually actually doesn't work that way, because if it didn't have any moral impetus, you wouldn't really want to have anybody really abiding by it. There would be no reason to abide by it.
I do believe, you know, most of the communist claims do have, like, ethical, you know, parts to them, but using dialectics, I believe they use dialectics to, you know, not just make it a whole moral thing about how being rich is bad or the state is, you know, unjust, as all the anarchists say.
Yeah, the whole basis is dialectics will explain the movement of history without requiring any external ethical driver. You know, you don't have to have people want the good. You know, it's just things will play out, such as, you know, there's exploitation, there's capitalism, people are unhappy, therefore, you know, they will return it. In this, they will naturally conceive, you know, a more universal society. It will just happen to be just, but it didn't come to be because of some ideal of justice. No necessity of that. And in that, I think him and Marx and anyone who's upon that line, comes from that line, is actually very wrong. But yeah, typical Marxist claim. Continuing, its acceptance hasn't got the character of a faith or a fanaticism or school or party. The productive forces, which consist in the main of the men adapted to production, in their groupings and in addition, the tools and mechanical means that are used, operate within the framework of forms of production. We understand by forms the dispositions and the relationships of interdependence within which is developed a productive and social activity. We understand these forms to be all the established hierarchies, family, military, theocracy, politics. The state is all of these, the prerogatives and the tribunals connected with them, all the rules and dispositions of an economic and legal character which resist all transgression. Society assumes a given type as log, as the productive forces maintain themselves within the framework of its forms of production. At a given moment in history, this equilibrium tends to be broken, from diverse causes, among them the progress of technique, the growth of population, expanding production. At a given moment in history, let me reread the whole sentence. At a given moment in history, this equilibrium tends to be broken, from diverse causes, among them the progress of technique, the growth of population, expanding communication, increasing the productive forces. Those in contradiction with traditional forms, tending to break this framework in pieces, and when successful, one finds oneself in the presence of a revolution. The community organizes itself into a new economic, social, and legal relationship. New forms take the place of old. So, nothing new. Although today we were having, there was a discussion, particularly with, Groucho on Discord, about the family. And I think that's one of the things in which this idea of the mode of production breaking old traditions is very pertinent. In that part of the success of the generalization of the nuclear family in capitalism is not only that it makes it more possible in that, you're no longer tied to your community, the people you live around for your livelihood directly anymore. Oftentimes nowadays you go and work for some goddamn international company that isn't based even in your state or perhaps not even in your country. But the fact that it becomes an increasing necessity, the freedom to work in certain things forces you to, if you're actually going to do that job, you got to move places because things are just not at your geographical convenience. And it's not like you're going to be carrying your parents everywhere you go. So, you have to move around. Families naturally get split up geographically because of this. So, this is an impetus for, which nobody intends, it just happens, for the old traditional families to start breaking up. So that's just one explanation. One example.
And also, with the great abundance of technology that's constantly produced by capitalism, new jobs are made, new ways of living are constantly created, and tradition is pretty much killed by it.
Yeah, the fact that capitalism allows for more atomized living is part of like the generalization of the atomization of the individual. The fact that you no longer need to deal with your neighbors for anything, makes it a lot easier for you to just ignore that your neighbors actually exist. Like me, I've never talked to a single person that has lived around this block right next to me anywhere. And I feel no need to, and I'm not about to. But continuing. The dialectic method discovers, applies, and confirms its solutions on the grand scale of collective phenomena and in scientific and experimental manner. Methods that the thinkers of the bourgeois epoch applied to the natural world in the course of an ideological struggle, which was the reflection of the revolutionary social struggle of their class against the theocratic and absolutist regimes, but which they were unable to extend into the social domain. They drew some conclusions acquired on this plane concerning the solutions of the problem of individual conduct, in opposition to the method employed by the schools of the religious, legal, philosophic, and economic adversaries. I frankly don't know what the hell that has to do with dialectical method at all. You could call it dialectical in a very loose sense of, a relationship. Goddamn dogs. In a sort of, dialogue form in which, the bourgeois come about and, their relationship and interaction with the old order is, in a very metaphorical way, analogical way, a dialogue. But other than that, it's not really dialectical, other than, of course, the usual sense of that Marxists really emphasize, which is contradiction in opposition, conflict. That's also another way which it is a dialectic, but it's not a dialectic in any methodological sense of a Hegelian dialectic or the dialectics which Marx uses in 1844 manuscripts or in Capital. Continuing, these held the standards of collective conduct on the inconsistent basis of the myth of the individual, held that being is individual spirit, mind, soul, and immortal, existing as juridical and civil subjects, existing as unchangeable units of economic policy, etc. Science has endeavored to go beyond the many hypotheses of the material, indivisible individual, to the study of atoms and to reduce them to irreducible units. It has defined complex points of meeting lines of force radiating from the external field of energy. Thus today one can say the cosmos is not the function of units, but that every unit is the function of the cosmos. I guess that's an example of the inversion of the primacy of the whole over the parts, or the parts over the whole, in which it's what Marxists normally call totality. It's the importance of totality. Lukács talks about the importance of totality. Marx rarely, but sometimes talks about the totality. David Harvey's another guy nowadays who talks about a lot about the totality. I think the Frankfurt School seems to have quite a bit of focus on totality as well.
Did Hegel?
Well, yeah, but it wasn't really a focus of the totality. When he talks about the totality, he talks about the totality. When he's not talking about the totality, he's not talking about the totality. Hegel's a guy who just takes everything in stride, really. Whenever he's talking about a specific thing, he's talking about that specific thing. Of course, he never forgets that it's part of a whole, but he doesn't constantly keep reminding us but the totality. And there is no final supremacy to the totality, because for Hegel, totalities and their parts form a totality as parts.
Yep.
So it's the weird dialectics. The whole is itself a part, and the parts together form a whole as parts.
Yeah. It's not only the destination, but the journey to the destination as well.
So there is no primacy, really, ultimately. Continuing, those who believe in the individual and speak of personality, dignity, liberty, of the duties of a citizen, do not employ Marxist thinking. Well, those people sound like scumbags to me. Because I like people with personality and dignity, and I like liberty. And I like enjoying the rights of citizenship.
We don't want individuality. We don't want liberty or personality. I know what you're talking about, AW. We're Marxists, so we don't believe in any of this.
Well, that's just straw manning them, but, they believe in things like that, they just don't call them that. That which moves man is not opinions or beliefs or phase, nor any phenomena whatsoever, so-called thought, which inspires their will or action. They are moved to act by their needs, which are the interests arising from the same material necessities beckoning groups all over simultaneously. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I think the guy who shot up Vegas this last week didn't do it because of any needs. I think 9/11 didn't happen because of any needs. Certainly needs are accounted for in that, but I don't think they were the driving factor.
This seems
this is just a reductive view.
Yeah, it's the typical, Marxist thing of wanting to see everything as material and nothing as ideal.
So continuing, they collide with the limitations imposed by the surrounding social structure, opposed to the satisfaction of these needs. They react individually and collectively in a sense which for the general average is determined in advance of the play of stimuli and reactions that give birth in the brain to sentiments, thoughts, and judgments. Okay, so that last line is just call yourself an eliminative materialist, Bordiga, because that is not Marxist at all.
I mean, why is he talking about chemicals in the brain? I mean, it just seems bizarre.
It's dialectics, man. It's dialectics. Those chemicals in your brains, they're having a dialogue right now. I don't know how, but they are. And they're the ones who really decide everything. It's not beliefs. People don't have beliefs. People think they do things because they believe, Sure,
it's just chemicals in the
brain. You dated that guy. It's not because you loved him. It's just the chemicals in your brain.
Well, I think if we think about this historically, it's probably because these discoveries about matter, about chemicals in the brain, were just being discovered. So Bordiga kind of wants to jump on that ship.
Well, it's the usual desire to be, quote-unquote, materialist and scientific. So, I mean, this is just a really reductive materialism here. It's what Marx would call vulgar materialism, actually. Not really a Marxist thing at all.
Well, what does Marx consider non-vulgar materialism?
His brand of philosophy, which is it's not reductive materialism. Like, Marx doesn't care. Like, Marx doesn't think that thoughts in your head really are atoms. That's not what he cares about. I mean, obviously, thoughts, beliefs, and ideals play a huge role for Marx. Why else do you think he would bother to come up with the theory of capital? Because if it was going to happen anyway, there would be no point. Why do you think he joined stuff like the International and tried to organize the workers? What's the whole point about raising the awareness of consciousness? Because guess what? Ideas, Marx literally says it, ideas can become material force. So while you may, one of the things you can say in the Marxist view is that in the final analysis, the real reason things happen is because of, economic needs, physical needs, material needs. You can still talk, you still have room to talk about ideas in between, the culture and all these other things. Because while the life of capitalism, the material living, the physical life, activities, whatnot, will generate certain ideas. From those ideas, the reflection in the thinking of those ideas will generate opposing ideas. So from the materiality, you abstract the ideality. From that ideality, you then also abstract the thing which will drive the new movement of ideality towards, immateriality. The ideas of human rights, the ideas of human dignity, all those things, while they're not perfectly or even generally upheld in most places in the world, nonetheless, they are ideas that drive the changes which make those ideas possible in reality. Because if nobody believes in communism, guess what? Communism isn't going to happen. Communism is one of those things that, you have to want. The whole thing is about the revolution for Marx is we want it because it's already possible. We have all the things needed. We just don't have the consciousness.
Oh God, have you read Eden Salvage's shit where he believes that revolution will just happen unconsciously, and they
That's
won't
a
even know
really
they're
naive
communist or
position.
something.
I mean, I haven't read this guy, and I'm not familiar with his work at all, but that sounds like a very naive position to take.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. He's a left-com blogger. A lot of left-coms share this idea that, you know, the proletariat will just rise up against capitalism without even knowing it.
Well, I mean, you can just look at revolutions in the past so many years and ask yourself how many of them actually resulted in communism. I mean, the Arab Spring wasn't a communist revolution. I mean, all of these color revolutions aren't communist. I mean, on what basis is he basing this? I mean,
Yeah, no basis. It's a left com. I didn't know you were talking about for a second, but then I remembered, oh, yes, I know who you're talking about. He has me linked on his blog. Well, so thanks to him. He also stole my dialectics article the first time I wrote it. But he eventually gave credit. But anyways, yeah, typical materialist reductionism, which is not really Marxist, and anybody who holds those ideas is naive. But continuing, this phenomena is naturally of great complexity and perhaps in some cases are the reverse of the general law that is verified, however. But that, be that as it may, whoever holds that individual consciousness, moral principles, opinions, and decisions of the individual or the citizen intervenes as moving cause in place of social and historical factors has no right to be called a Marxist. Well, I'm glad Martin Luther King wasn't a Marxist. Because, I mean, it's stupid. It's stupid to be a Marxist in the Bordiga sense. But finishing this off, the contradiction between the productive forces and the social forms is manifested as a struggle between classes who have antagonistic economic interests. In the final stages, this struggle becomes the armed struggle for the conquest of power. So I don't know why this was titled Method. There was nothing about method in this whole section.
I mean, it reminds me of the way that Bookchin was just slashing down his or all the ideologies he doesn't like, and he wasn't really providing anything to back up why he doesn't like them. It's just Bordiga just going after, oh, I don't like morality, I don't like the idea of human rights. Okay, but on what basis? Like, how do you back this stuff up? It's just bold assertions with like no substance to them.
Yeah, it's an introduction, so I mean, it's expected, but at the same time, like, at least I would have expected some kind of method. There was no method here at all. It's like stuff develops, it's science, it's materialist. Great. How do I do it? Apparently not with morals and whatnot. Apparently, I mean, if you went by this, apparently you don't do it at all, so it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what you think, it will happen. It's, you know, it's just a clash of antagonistic interests. What are you talking about? You don't need ideas. Why would these people be fighting? It's not because of ideas. Why would people, you know, be just passive and not receptive to, you know, getting rid of capitalism despite, you know, starving in Africa? Can't be because of ideas. It's just the, you know, just the mode of production and antagonistic class interests. I mean, actually, that's a great point, I think. Africa is a total disproving of this thesis. You can't really get more utterly destitute and miserable than Africa. And notice that there is no revolutionary movement happening whatsoever.
Or you could look at other parts in the world and see where there is quote-unquote resistance to capital. It doesn't really take the form of socialism, it takes the form of nationalism or some kind of reactionary ideology.
Yeah. A lot of the social movements right now are not socialist. The right wing.
I think it is true, however, that, when you're starving, when you're in a country with a poor economic situation, or whenever crises happen, there is going to be a want for change. People aren't going to be happy with their current situation.
Yep, but that
Society
change...
will... Yeah, that change isn't necessarily going to be communist.
That's pretty much it, and that's the problem. There is no actual necessity for communism. In that sense, it could be fascism just as much.
I mean, fascism came from crises. In Italy, people were pretty much starving because of the Great Depression and World War I. That's why fascism came. And Germany, of course, was screwed. That's how Hitler rose to power.
Well, what would you say about well, they're not really fascist. I guess you could call them fascism light. Politicians like Modi or Erdogan, and ask how. I mean, Erdogan's pretty much a dictator. Modi was democratically elected. India prides itself on being a pretty active democracy. Democracy, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, these guys are very right wing, and yet they enjoy some degree of popular support. I mean, is it the oppressed who support them? I mean, I don't know. I'm not familiar with Turkish or Indian politics, but you have those kinds of currents. And it's the same thing too in Europe. I mean, a lot of these far right parties are being supported by people who really believe that, oh, Le Pen is going to bring back the jobs. So
Oh, yeah, and definitely, like, in America, right-wing politics have been getting much more popular after 2008, culminating in Charlottesville, of course.
So I think the way we can distill just I think really there is no positive point to that section we just read, unfortunately. But if we can make a negative point against it that is positive, it would be that yes, there has to be obviously a material necessity for people to want change, but that material necessity itself does not dictate how this manifests ideally. You can have a slave society in which, well, the slaves can revolt, and do they have to necessarily end slavery? No, I mean, it could be they could enslave the enslavers. Why would they not? Well, the only reason why they wouldn't is because guess what? They'd have some sort of different ideals, some kind of different morality in which they say, you know what, we just shouldn't do the same shit again. So, yeah. Let's skip down to the dialectical evolution of historical forms. It's 2 sections down. And it seems like this will be a use of the method he was talking about earlier. So, the section on method, not dialectical. I'm not surprised. It's also, another one. I don't know, man. I'm actually surprised. Trotsky was better than this, and I hate Trotsky. That Trotsky had more to say, that was more value to me, is pretty amazing. So continuing, the dialectical evolution of historical forms. The question is to put in its proper relationship each aspect of the problem, to put in its proper relationship each aspect of the problem, the productive forces and the social factors. Subsection A. It is a metaphysical position which declares in principle authority or liberty, royalist or republican, aristocrat or democrat, and refers in polemic to rules placed outside of the historic context. Plato had already in his first tentative system of political science gone beyond the mystical absolutism of principles, and Aristotle followed it in distinguishing three types: the power of one, the few, the many, the good forms and the bad, monarchy and tyranny, aristocracy and oligarchy, democracy and demagogy. The modern analysis since Marx goes much further. In the present historic phase, nearly all political formulas of propaganda use the worst traditional motifs of superstitious religions, legal forms, and philosophies of all sorts. It is necessary to oppose this chaos of ideas, the reflection of the chaos of relations of interest of a society in decay. In order to introduce this analysis, it is necessary to proceed to an analogous evaluation of the well-known relationships of preceding historic epochs. So, I don't really know what the point about this section was. Maybe it'll become clear in the next one. Subsection B. Beginning with the economic forms, it is in no sense necessary to declare oneself a partisan in general of communist or private economy, liberal or monopolist, individual or collective, nor praise the methods of each system according to the general well-being. In following that method, one falls into utopianism, which is the exact opposite of the Marxist dialectic. So, yeah, I mean, this is really showing a determinist, reductive understanding of everything. I mean, I don't know about you, but the only reason I'd ever want communism is because, well, it was better for my well-being. So, you know, if you can't talk about that to people, how do you think people are ever going to want it? But then again,
it's just gonna happen.
Yeah, then again, that's what I was about to say. It seems, you know, he doesn't seem to think you'd have to convince people about it. Continuing, the classic example of Engels on communism as the negation of the negation is well known. The first forms of human production were communist. Private property next appeared, a system much more complex and efficient. From this, human society returns to communism. This modern communism would be unrealizable if primitive communism had not been superseded, conquered and destroyed by the system of private property. The Marxist considers as an advantage this initial transformation. What we may say of communism applies as well to all other economic forms such as slavery, serfdom, manufacturing capitalism, industrial capitalism, and thus consequently, communism. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but it seems to me to be exactly talking about how, well, it's better. You know, why did private property supersede primitive communism? Well, because it was better for production, better for, I don't know, individualistic reasons, you know, capacities of, you know, splitting a bit away from the commune. You know, why is communism going to be better? Well, must be because it should be better for our well-being. And you know, I certainly have my personal gripes with this nowadays, in which I don't think that this idea of everything will be communal property holds very well, in that I think that's a regression of freedom. Because I like having my stuff. It reflects a bit about me. You know, it's not just having like mass manufactured stuff that is mine, but no, I mean like having stuff that literally is individualized. You know, even if it was manufactured, I can draw stuff on it, I can shape it, can craft a little bit on top of it, you know, make it mine. Or I could just craft stuff that is just personally mine. You know, that's private property, that's personal property. Don't see how that would be bettered by communal ownership of such things, but that's just a rant of mine.
Well, I mean, some things should be communally owned. I don't see a problem with, you know, factories being cooperatives.
Oh no, of course not.
Yeah, no, I mean, that
I've
makes
always
sense.
in favor like collective bargaining and stuff like that. I don't even see a problem with the commons being owned, like the means of production or anything. It's just I want to own products that I want to use for my personal use.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chaya?
I'm generally in agreement. Like, I think, although I would wonder too, like, it is kind of unpredictable, like, what kind of shape communism will take. Like, but I do think that, nobody's coming after your toothbrush, for instance. That whole.
Yeah, that's the common one because.
Well, toothbrushes don't even need to be property anyways, since they're so
I don't
easy to
know,
make.
man.
They're not
I
the.
don't. If anybody wants to use my toothbrush, there's some kind of sick fuck. I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah, but like even if they do, it's like who cares if they steal your toothbrush?
I don't
Who cares
know, man.
if they like destroy it?
Wouldn't
Get another one.
wouldn't that
Get a
bother
new
you?
one.
No, wouldn't
It's
that
just
bother
a
you?
toothbrush.
Wouldn't that bother you though? Wouldn't that be telling of somebody like just like being obsessed with you?
Maybe.
Like,
it'd
somebody
be kinda
stalking you.
creepy.
Yeah, so somebody, hey, I don't yeah, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
if they
but we're
steal my
talking-
underwear.
Yeah, but we're talking about the state taking it, not just a random person stealing your property. That can happen now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
well, no, but
again,
that's
though,
kind of
like,
the point
I
about like
wouldn't
communal
care
property.
like about the underwear itself that being stolen. I'd be caring more about my, someone creeping on me.
Yeah. Your privacy.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of property, I think, is exactly that. It's a personal privacy. It's things that are private to you. You get to do with them whatever it is you please, but nobody else does.
Just like with my body pillow.
Like a house, like I don't see like anything wrong with private housing. I think if it's possible, if it's not possible, it's one thing. But if it's possible, it's just like, why not? I can't have my own little private house and like have my kitchen designed however I want, have my walls painted however I want, make it look whatever I want. Yeah, but there are indeed people who just argue against private property in total, and I think Marxism has a very powerful latency towards that, or tendency towards that, I mean. Yeah, but anyways, continuing. What was that? Section B. Beginning with economic forms, it is in no sense necessary to declare oneself. I already read that. To do this. Oh yeah. Continuing, the petty trading mercantile economy in which objects satisfying human needs cease to be directly acquired and consumed by the private producer, which is the end of barbarism, becoming objects of exchange through barter at first, with money developing as a means of exchange later, represented a great social revolution. It made possible the adaptation of different individuals to diverse productive work, division of labor. Enlarging and differentiating enormously the character of social life, one can recognize at the same time the changes from one stage to the other in stating that after a series of types of economic organization, based on the common principle of mercantilism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, the trend today is to a non-mercantile economy, rejecting the thesis that production is impossible without monetary exchange of merchandise as a conformist and reactionary principle. So I'm not sure that's quite historically accurate, really.
I'd also
I
like
mean,
to
I
say,
wouldn't be surprised. They didn't have that great of histories back then, but I think a lot of history now would go into far more detail. It wasn't just that private economy allowed for the individualization of labors. I mean, people had the division of labor in like feudalism and slavery. The difference is, how much division of labor and what society was even wanting in the first place.
I'd also like to add that while ethics don't matter to, communism, he does view mercantilism as reactionary. It's a very ethical view he has there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a normative statement, which is very much tied with ethics. Ethics is not just about, your action towards other people, and I mean, most specifically and concretely it is, but in a more general form, it's about normativity, about the things, the way things should be. And insofar as things aren't what they should be, you get to measure them against that and say, well, it's either good or bad. So, I mean, I don't know. When he says that mercantile economy, petty commodity trade, made possible the adaptation of different individuals to diverse productive work, enlarging and differentiating enormously the character of social life. Yeah, that's true. It's true, but he doesn't explain why, and the reason why is, well, because once things start being handled through money then begins to allow for the dictation of what kind of work is to be done. So even though nobody was spending their time, doing something, whatever it may be, some hypothetical X, before that, now some guy is willing to offer money. Guess what? Now a lot of people are going to start doing that, because they want to get a cut of that pie, the cash. Likewise, people will start trying to come up with ways to entice people to spend money as well. So there's a drive towards an ever-increasing amount of differentiation and specialization. Just from the simple enticement of money. Sorry, be right back. My dog wants to go outside. So continuing, the abolition of mercantilism can succeed today, and only today because of the fact of collective labor and the concentration of productive forces. Capitalism lasts with the mercantile economies. Okay, that just seems like a weird sentence. Capitalism... I'll just read it. Capitalism lasts to the mercantile economies. In realizing this development and concentration makes possible the breaking of the bonds within which all use values circulate as merchandise, and in which human work itself is treated as such. A century before this stage, a critique of the mercantile system, based on the general reasoning at the base of its philosophy, legal or moral code, would have been sheer folly. I'm not quite sure what he's critiquing there. Yeah, I have no idea, but it doesn't seem important, quite frankly. So far, no good. Subsection C, the various types of social systems which have successively appeared and lived out their collective life, differentiate themselves from primitive individualism, going through an immense cycle, the relations within which the individual life and movement becomes more and more complex, cannot be individually judged as favorable or unfavorable. They must be considered in relation to their historic development, which comprises a variable role in the diverse transformations and revolutions. Each of these institutions surges up as a revolutionary conquest, develops and reforms in long historic cycles, becoming finally a reactionary obstacle and conformist. The institution of the family appears as the first social form at the time in the human species, when the bond between parents and offspring prolongs itself well beyond the period that is physiologically necessary. It also just happens because, we're fucking social creatures who like to be around each other, so we don't go out in the fucking woods alone.
I don't know, some of us do. Thoreau did.
I do.
But most of us don't. And thank Hashem for that.
Oh.
But you have to be around people. Otherwise,
yeah,
you wouldn't be here.
You always come back. You say you hate us, but you always come back.
Always come back.
Well, yeah, I think it's very important that we point out that we are socialists because we are social animals and we care about the social sphere. I mean, that's the whole point.
So continuing.
I need people. Family.
Yep, so do I. Alright, sorry. My dog was wanting to get up on the bed. It's like I'm his personal, butler or something. Open his door, feed him his food, rub his belly when he wants, put him on the bed and put him down. Alright, that's how socialist we are. We extend society to other animals. But continuing, the first form of authority is then born, exercised by the mother, afterwards by the father over the descendants, even when they are physically developed and vigorous. At that stage, we are therefore in the presence of a revolution, since there appeared the first possibility of a collectively organized life, which constitutes the base of development, which leads ultimately to the first form of organized society in the state. So, this reminds me of, what is it? Those theories of the state of nature. Obviously, it was never the case that, there was just a guy and a woman, and they screwed, and they had kids, and then the first family was born, and we were... Whatever it is that we evolved from in the whole long chain of history, it was already social by the time we were humans. So we already were living in communities by that point.
Well, it sounds like he's trying to invoke some kind of anthropology, which, if you are interested in the subject, then you would learn it much better elsewhere.
Yeah, this anthropology was not very good back in the day.
Like, he's trying to be some kind of dumbed down Engels, origin of the family, etc.
Yeah, that's actually probably where he's coming from. I haven't read that. But
What?
Well, yeah, I haven't read the origins of...
I read it because you recommended it to me.
Well, yeah, I probably recommended it to you because it was probably related to something you said.
Oh, I thought you read it. Okay, well, I liked it. Parts of it, at least.
It sounds like an interesting book, at least. I think anthropology is important to any analysis we could make about people, obviously.
Yeah, there's... I'm not saying I think Engels thing is bad. What is it? The origin of the family state. There's another one that's also about the origin of consciousness from the labor. Both pretty interesting, and both I think were very much inspired by Hegel's own philosophical anthropology.
Yeah.
But yeah, continuing, the new social system of a more vast nature contains and disciplines the institution of the family, as in the first cities, states, and aristocratic regimes, afterwards in the bourgeois regime. All are based on the institution of inherited taboos, conventions. There then appears the necessity of an economy which supersedes the play of individual interests. The institution of the family, which is too narrow, with its too narrow limits, becomes an obstacle and a reactionary element in society. Without denying its historical role, the modern communist, after observing that the capitalist system has already deformed and dissolved the sanctity of the family institution, fights it openly and proposes to supplant it. Well, if I ever have kids, you're not taking them, Bordiga. You're taking them over my dead body.
If you want my kids, you can take my kids from my cold, dead hands.
I think that it's necessary to have parentage.
Well, yeah, dude. Like, nobody's gonna love you like your parent, like a genuine parent. Like, they don't have to be your biological parent, but you gotta have someone who really actually loves you and loves you like in that deep sense. Because, like, you know, your local community nanny just can't care for you that much.
Yeah.
You know, they can care about you, but they're not gonna sacrifice their life for you like a parent does. You know, they're not going to be there for you for all the things that a parent can be. You know, the parent thing isn't just like this sort of external thing. You know, there really is a really powerful bond that can happen. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that much. It doesn't happen enough. But, you know, if it's there, I mean, there's no reason to be destroying it.
Yeah, I definitely lost something in my life when my father left me. He just said he was going to go to the grocery store and get some milk, but he never came back.
I knew that was where it was going, but...
Oh, did you watch that stupid movie too?
What movie?
Oh, I just remember that from, what was it? That writer. Hemingway.
Yeah. I mean, that's been around forever.
I hadn't heard about that before. I'm that ignorant.
Oh, you didn't grow up on my dad left me jokes?
Nope.
Oh.
Alright, continuing. The different forms of the state, monarchy, and republic alternate in the course of history in a complex manner and are represented one or the other. Okay, there's nothing really of value in the rest of this section. Let me skip to subsection D. He's just basically enumerating things as if they were facts and as if I'm just gonna fucking accept them because he says them. Well, you know, I'm not a moron, Bordiga.
Well, yeah. He's not Kant. We can't just accept what he's saying.
You're not Kant. You're not a good boy. You know, at least you don't have like this a priori authority over me. So, subsection D, the crises arising in the economic forms are reflected not only in the political and social institutions, but also in religious beliefs and philosophic opinions. It is in relation to historic situations and social crises that one must consider the legal norms, religious positions, or philosophies, since each appears successively under the revolutionary banner, reformist banner, or conformist banner. The movement which bears the name of Christ was antiformist and revolutionary. To state that in every man there exists a soul of divine origin destined to immortality, whatever his social position or caste, was equivalent to rise up in revolution against the oppressive forms and slavery of the Orient. As long as the law permitted the human person to be an object of transactions, to be merchandised like an animal, to state the equality of believers meant a slogan of struggle which came up against the implacable resistance of the theocratic organization of judges, aristocrats, and military in the state of antiquity.
Which is one of the principal reasons that I champion Christianity sometimes, on occasion at least.
It's one of the reasons why I'm a proud European, Eurocentric universalist.
This, but unironically.
It's not ironically, I'm not Xi.
Oh, I know. Like, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was just saying, this, but we are unironic about it.
Okay. Yeah, European universalism. I mean, I don't know what's so great about like other people's cultures that have these weird hangovers from the past, but If it mixes with European universalism, great. If it doesn't, well, screw them.
In certain ways, like, not, oh, let's just go kill them all, or whatever.
Well, yeah,
you know,
no, I mean,
but
it's like,
in the sense that they should be held to the higher standard of Eurocentrism, I think. I mean, that makes us sound like dicks. It's true. It is more free.
yeah, I mean, okay, look, a lot
Any
of people,
thoughts,
a lot of
guys?
people here in the First World, for example, like, a lot of you come from, let's say it, First World, lower middle class,
Yeah.
white people. You don't come from a communal society. I at least grew up in a communal Hispanic society. I hate it. I don't like this whole tight-knit community feel, because as wonderful as it is that you can go to your neighbor and ask for a cup of sugar and have a chat, it's also not wonderful that every goddamn single thing you do is going to be gossip for the entire town. Every single thing, and everything you do is going to be talked about the entire town. If you're a little bit out of line, you're going to be that person everybody looks at and stares.
That's exactly what Orthodox Jewish communities are like too. Like,
I mean, it's
everyone's
really...
there, yeah, I mean, everyone's there to lend you a hand, but at the same time, I mean, if someone gets out of line, everybody knows about it. You know, it's a double-edged sword in that regard.
Yeah, it has its own it grants you another form of freedom, but it takes a form of freedom away. And if you like that, that's great. I don't think so. The thing is, I don't think it should be enforced, so to say. I like the freedom in which, okay, if you want to have your own community, great. But if I want to live outside of it, I want that freedom. I want to be able to do that.
Well, the problem is, I think you nailed it right there. The problem with these authoritarian communal structures is the fact that they are authoritarian and that they are so rigid, and that they impose this very strict moral code on everyone. And if you do something that's outside the norm or outside the standard, even just a little bit, I mean, other people are going to go after you, and you have no room to kind of just relax. And that's...
Yeah, it's the room of individuality. It's the privacy of the individual.
It's definitely the problem with the conception of communism many people have. I try to advocate more individualistic communism. I don't even know if it's communism, but
Yeah.
I like individualism.
Wildly in individualism. I would say it's wildly in socialism.
I mean, like, capitalism, in a sense, is individualistic, but in other ways it's very anti-individualistic.
Yeah. It doesn't praise genuine individualism.
Oh, definitely
It wants
not.
you to conform to its
yeah, capitalism is ruled by the popular, by social capital, and capital, which is a social capital.
Yep. Continuing, after long historic phases in the abolition of slavery, Christianity became official religion and pillar of the state. We recognize its reformist cycle in the Europe of modern times and in struggling against the excessive connection of the church, with layers of the most privileged and most oppressive. Today, there is no ideology more conformist than Christianity, which already in the period of the French Revolution made its doctrine and organization the arms for the most powerful resistance by the old regimes. Today, the powerful network of the church and religious confession on every hand reconciles and is officially in accord with the capitalist regime. It is employed as a fundamental means of defense against the danger of the proletarian revolution. In which case, I mean, I have to disagree with him, because you can have radical Christianity, you can have radical Judaism, you can have these, and it's not a problem of like, oh, well, there's just niche things, a few people believe, the reason they're not believed is because, they're structurally weak, they're the minority, but it's not things that people can't believe.
I also have to question, why he conflates confession as, some kind of capitalist ploy. Okay, confessing is good for capitalism. Because, you don't really see confession in the Protestant tradition that much. That's mostly a Roman Catholic, pre-capitalist kind of thing, kind of tradition.
Well, Bordiga is Italian,
Yeah, that's
so
true.
he learns Catholicism. But I don't.
Yeah, so he's probably. I mean, he's talking about that,
Yeah.
but like that's there's Catholicism and there's like the core of Christianity as such, and so one can definitely make that whole distinction and just he's wrong.
Yeah, I think the best example to bring up is the diggers during the English Civil War, who were like totally Christian, but they were complete proto-communists. We can't just reduce religion, Christianity, to just some bourgeois propaganda when it really does have some communist implications at points. And a lot of New England as well, the founders were complete Puritans, but they were also pretty communist at times.
Definitely. Continuing and finishing off, in regard to the social relationships today, which it acquired long before, that each particular individual represented an economic enterprise theoretically susceptible of an active or passive commerce, the superstition which encloses each individual in the circle of a moral reckoning of his acts, and the illusion of life after death determined by his reckoning, this reckoning is nothing but the reflection in the brain of man present bourgeois society founded on private economy. It is therefore impossible to lead the struggle for breaking through the framework of an economy of private enterprise and individual moral reckoning without taking a position openly anti-religious and anti-Christian. So I completely disagree with that, and wow. This was worse, much, much worse than Bookchin. And I thought Bookchin was empty and boring. This guy.
Damn.
It's better than Mao.
No, man. I at least had
so.
something to say about Mao. Like, there's really nothing to say about this. It's empty. Like,
we might have to change from the Bookchinian insult to the Bordigist insult.
Yeah, I mean, like...
for being empty and contentless.
Yeah, wow. Why? I don't know. Why anybody would read Bordiga is beyond me. At least this is supposed to be something introductory, obviously, so
Yeah.
it's not like it's going to be this big theoretical thing. But even then, like, it was just weak. I wouldn't recommend this, even if I were, a Marxist. Even if I didn't know anything, had I read this at the beginning of the days when I was interested, I would have thought this was bad.
It just sounds like Lefty Boltier shit.
Why do you think Lefty Pole loves him so much, though? Oh, there you go.
Have they read him? I don't know. Like, I always see, like, read Bordiga, but I never see anything that he has said, ever.
I mean, I think they just like him because they assume he's an alternative to Lenin or whatever other trends in leftism.
Well, no,
I mean,
Bordiga
it's just
isn't
a
an
meme.
alternative to Lenin.
Yeah.
Bordiga, from what I know, like usually portrays himself as Leninist, or even more Leninist than Lenin.
Yeah, if we need a good alternative to Lenin, Lukács.
Dude, Lukács is for, like, you gotta actually think.
Yeah. Or Korsch.
But yeah, wow. We read Bordiga. To you memesters, fuck you. If you knew this, all right, you got us.
They're laughing now.
Hell, they're laughing now. You wasted like 30 minutes of my life.
Again.
Again. Well, no, Mao was like, what was it?
No, Bookchin.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, yeah, Mao wasn't a waste. Like, Bookchin was a waste.
Yeah. And your dog today suggested me The Politics of Cosmology by Bookchin, and I told him we were not going to read any more Bookchin, but I might read it on my own, just to see what it's about, so I can talk about it with him.
Yeah, if it's anything interesting, we might read it. I doubt it.
Well, he said that he talks about the history of Western philosophy, and I'm like, well,
if I
know
wanted
the
history
of
of Western
philosophy.
philosophy, I would read the history of Western philosophy, and I would not read bullshit about it. Then again, I mean, it might be like with the rest of his essays, in which like I'm going to talk about this, and in fact he never gets to talk about it. Nah, I mean, I do believe he'll talk about it. It's usually what I did in the essay on the philosophy of nature, which is kind of what made me dislike it, because I wanted to know what the fuck his thoughts on the philosophy of nature was. But instead, he goes on about the history of philosophy, and it was not well written. It was not very interesting. So yeah, I couldn't care.
All right, who's the next meme? I refuse to read Sterner.
Settlers. Do you
Oh my
want
God,
to? You guys want to get tortured?
That is no. I've read parts of that. Like when I first like was getting into Marxism, you know, the tankies. I went on R-communism. Some people recommended it, and like it got quite a bit of praise. And I didn't know shit about the history, but like what really put me off was the America Caca stupid writing, and I just thought that was so childish, and I couldn't take it seriously. So
yeah. What about Tikkun?
Tikkun. The group, not the concept. Yeah.
We could read Pol Pot.
Oh, great.
Or Kim Il-sung.
Yeah, let's read Kim Il-sung. The Juche idea.
Oh God. Has Rue like made videos about that? I mean, he defends North Korea.
He doesn't really make like. I mean, speaking as you know, but no, to my knowledge, he's never really made a video about Juche or how it completely goes against Maoism. Yeah.
I must be thinking of someone else, because someone made a Juche video from around the time I was watching those Marxist-Leninists. I was never Marxist-Leninist, really, but...
There's like a
Lefty
Pol channel. It's like a Russian channel. They talk about Juche.
Must be what it is.
Yeah, it's like animated in. I learned nothing from it. It just sounded like nonsense.
There was some guy who claimed to have been part of a Juche commune in Florida that I had a dialogue with a few times.
Wait, are we still recording?
Yeah, unfortunately. So yeah, we learned nothing from Bordiga. More like Bordiga. Yeah.
Well, I mean, literally anything is more interesting than this article we read.
I did look into I was bored on my way to work. I think Friday, and I started looking through Stalin's on dialectical materialism.
Oh
man, that is bad. That is bad.
You want to do that one next?
I don't know. It's really boring. Like it feels like this. I mean, it's you know, people will probably go, "How dare you say this?" But I'll say I think it's even better than at least this Bordiga crap. But it's not much better.
But comrade, you have to read Stalin's book on dialectical materialism. Comrade, it explains everything, comrade.
I mean, it's just... I forget what part I was reading. I mean, I thought we might read something from Materialism and Imperial Criticism by Lenin. As I mentioned on Twitter or Lefty Poll, I skimmed some chapters. I read one chapter and I just thought it was absolutely awful philosophically.
Oh, there's another meme that we could read. The Deluser
Tchaikovsky.
himself.
Oh, the Deluser. Deleuze isn't really a meme, I would say.
Oh no, he is. Like, he's a meme everywhere. On Twitter,
Well,
at least.
Of course. I mean, he is a meme. Foucault's a meme. But I'm not saying... I'm saying they're not meme philosophers. Like, they have ideas.
Foucault has ideas.
Yeah.
I don't know about Deleuze, though.
He does, but he misunderstands
do.
Hegel. I don't want to get into that,
is
though.
really incoherent. I mean,
Yeah.
I attempted to read 1,000 Plateaus, like 3 or 4 times, and I just rage quit every time.
But
I read a few of them-
schizoanalysis, come on.
I read with one of our friends.
Swedenista, didn't you?
No. Well, yeah, but I'm in Agaros.
Oh, he read 1,000 Plateaus? I thought he was
No, we
reading,
read Deleuze.
Oh, yeah.
Not that one, but I forget what it's called.
Something
By
repetition.
Oedipus.
Difference and repetition.
Difference and
Yeah,
repetition.
difference. Yeah, difference and repetition,
Difference.
and then his imminence a life. His imminence a life. I couldn't make heads or tails of. I think. I may have to reread it, but there was something objectionable in it that I was like, oh, he just misunderstands Hegel, I think. Because he would make these claims about Hegel. I don't want to get into it, but, you know, it's clear, like, he doesn't understand Hegel's position.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's minor, really. The question is, does he have any coherent positions?
A few. It's just hard to tease them out. You have to understand his language, and I really don't. Because he'll just say a term and expect you to know it, I guess. I don't know. I may need to try harder, but I wouldn't dismiss him and say he's just a meme.
Yeah, I've noticed at least a slight oh, God, what was it? Doug Lane said he probably would try to do a podcast on against Deleuzians and how they're all because they're all reactionaries.
Yeah.
In essence, because I've heard that before, that people say that, you know, if you really believe in the stuff Deleuze is talking about, you inevitably turn reactionary.
Did he say why? Like, did he give any indication why? Or?
I don't know, since I don't know anything about Deleuze. All I know is the only delusions I know are Egel Waffles, Nick Land. That's it. But I've heard that attack before from other people.
Oh yeah, that Dark Deleuze or whatever guy, Anthony. No, not Andrew something.
Anthony Fontana.
No, no, not Anthony Fontana.
Yeah, he does seem pretty reactionary.
His name is who? Anthony Fantano?
Yeah.
He's not reactionary, I don't think. He's just like a normal liberal guy.
He's
Andrew
a centrist that's been like indoctrinated by alt-right propaganda.
I've
no,
seen
he
one
made a video against that.
I saw a video of his, like, on, I don't know if it's his, I think it's like some other channel where he just talks shit. And
yeah,
I mean, like,
well, that's just memes. His other channel.
Well, no, but he was like going on about, like, what was it, like identity politics or some shit, and like it just seemed like a really reactionary view that he had.
Well, no, it wasn't like a reactionary thing. He was just memeing. Like, that channel is just memes.
Oh, I'm not a fascist, I'm just a meme.
Well, no, he made a video recently about how that channel is just memes, and people were calling him an alt-right guy, but he isn't. I don't even watch his videos, but my friends linked me that video because they're super alt-right type people. You know, my real-life acquaintances.
See, I love these talks. We go from talking about Bordiga and shitting on him to defending Anthony Fantano.
Well, yeah, I would defend Anthony Fantano even if he were an alt-right type believer. Not defending his views, but he's not a political guy. He's a music guy. I don't really care about his political opinions.
Now, see,
It's more
this
interesting
is a
than
contentious
Bordiga
thing.
at least.
No, I mean, this is a contentious thing. It's almost universally the case that all aesthetes are reactionaries.
I mean, I'm not, but
But you're not an aesthete.
I'm an aesthete, but a specific kind of aesthete.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about like absolute aesthetes, like people whose core principle is an aesthetic one, are universally reactionaries.
Well, yeah, because they're trying to defend that aesthetic and hold it as superior to everything else. But yeah, I don't think he's that much of an aesthete, even.
I mean,
Why am I defending Anthony Fantano? I don't even care about the guy. It's just, you know, he's dedicated to music, really. He's not a political person. He's just into music, mostly. And it's not that important to take down people who aren't politically active or anything. Like, I don't think he's going to start a movement. His fans are definitely reactionary. I don't want to make any enemies, but it's clear that they are.
Anyone watching this, if you watch Anthony Fantano, you're probably reactionary. That's what Hyperion is trying to suggest.
If you watch the Fantano, you should go jump in a pantano.
Do you have any idea who we're talking about, Kaya?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually subscribe to one of his channels, so...
I guess you're reactionary then. That's what Hyperion would say, at least. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he'd probably say that.
Put all the words in my mouth and allow me to just become the pariah of the music world. I mean, everyone hates me already, so it doesn't really matter, but I don't... Like, I don't want to defend myself or anything, but I don't care what people listen to. People on the website I go on act like if I don't like an album, I want it banned or something, but I've never said anything like that. It's just funny to me.
Well,
and a lot of them
have it banned? What if it was a reactionary album? Wouldn't you be a reactionary in enabling it?
Why would I care, though?
Because this is a mouse struggle session.
Oh, okay.
Self-crit or leave.
Yeah. I am self-critical.
Self-crit or slit wrist.
I just don't like the idea.
Bordiga, if he thinks the whole confession thing is reactionary, he probably hates Maoists for their whole self-crit thing.
Oh yeah, hey, Chaya.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this in the thread, like it's been dead now for like a week though. Like, where like the whole self-crit thing of like Maoism, like to me that seemed like a version of an extreme version of what was it that you just said, Josh? What's it called? Confession. Yeah, it's a sort of like very extreme form of public confession in which you must confess your sins to the party or to the commune.
Oh yeah.
And constantly. Like you never get you always have something wrong. There's always something to self-criticize about.
Well, I think that the real problem with Maoism, I wouldn't even say it's Mao Zedong thought itself, but I would say it's the fact that all these Western white boys take it up, and when they take it up, I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's basically like putting on yellowface for them. That they just try to copy what, these Asians are doing, and they really lack any kind of emotional discipline or any kind of self-control. So for them, when they try to self-criticize or when they give one of their comrades a struggle session, it just turns into one big emotional banter, and they're just all screaming at each other and they're beating each other up, and you lack that discipline element to it.
All right, since we mentioned it, I'll say let's knock two birds with one stone and like cover a little section of Stahl in just like about less than 10 minutes, because it just will take 10 minutes.
All right.
Okay.
Just throw it around. Okay, reading from Dialectical and historical materialism. Just to show you there's nothing new under the sun. Go down to contradictions inherent in nature, section D. Alright, a reading. Quoting Stalin. Contrary to metaphysics, dialectics holds that internal contradictions are inherent in all things and phenomena of nature, for they all have their negative and positive sides, a past and a future, something dying away and something developing, and that the struggle between these opposites, the struggle between the old and the new, between that which is dying away and that which is being born, between that which is disappearing and that which is developing, constitutes the internal content of process development. The internal content is the transformation of quantitative changes into qualitative changes. Quite metaphysical to me. The dialectical method therefore holds that the process development from the lower to the higher takes place not as a harmonious unfolding of phenomena, but as disclosure of the contradictions inherent in things and phenomena, as a struggle of opposite tendencies which operate on the basis of these contradictions. Quoting Lenin, in its proper meaning, Lenin says, dialectics is the study of the contradiction within the very essence of things. End quote, his philosophical notebooks. And further, quote, development is the struggle of opposites, end quote. Such, in a brief, are the principal features of the Marxist dialectical method. And there you go. That's the dialectical method. It's... What have we said? I can't believe it's not dialectics. Well, yeah, it's not dialectics. It's also pretty useless. It is easy to understand how immensely important is the extension of the principles of the dialectical method to the study of social life and history of society, and how immensely important is the application of these principles to the history of society and to the practical activities of the party or the proletariat. If there are no isolated phenomena in the world, if all phenomena are interconnected and interdependent, then it is clear that every social system and every social movement in history must be evaluated not from the standpoint of eternal justice or some other preconceived idea, as it is not infrequently done by historians, but from a standpoint of the conditions which gave rise to that system or that social movement with which they are connected. Okay, it's not too bad. The usual monistic principle. By the way, this is a metaphysical idea. It is also one that leads specifically to Spinozist pantheistic monism. And it does not at all invalidate any principles of eternal justice or ideas. Continuing the slave system would be senseless, stupid, and unnatural under modern conditions. Tell that to people in Africa, and people in the Middle East who pick your goddamn chocolate. So a lot of it's still slave labor. But under the conditions of a disintegrating primitive communal system, the slave society is a quite understandable and natural phenomenon, since it represents an advance on the primitive communal system. Basically taking the usual view that, all of these were necessary stages of history, which, by the way, Marx didn't believe. Marx didn't think that these were actually universal forms of a development for all societies. It's really hard to see why slavery would be economically necessary at all. I mean, you could have just started out with feudalism. You could have just stayed with regular old communes.
Well, I was about to say, like, when he says it's an advancement, I mean, what kind of advancement is he talking about? Like, is he talking about the standard of living being raised? Is he talking about technology? Is he talking about social relations? It's very vague.
Yeah, I would assume it means the material standard of living for the masters is raised. Therefore, they can advance technology and all these things, but then the slaves will take it all over. Revolt, take the technology, take the knowledge, and incorporate what the masters knew and go on their merry way.
The biggest problem with the whole idea about, the stages of history is that it doesn't really accurately cover what happened everywhere. Because different parts of the world have developed differently, obviously. Like, feudalism hasn't been everywhere. It's a Eurocentric idea.
Yeah, if we ever go to some planet and meet some very primitive peoples, still living primitive communism, we're just gonna go there and take one out. And they're like, "Come on, man, what's wrong with you? You're not gonna advance this way. You gotta enslave each other. Look at that guy. Make him your bitch, or something like that. You gotta advance the means of production.
Reverse Posidus.
You gotta advance, man.
Posidus.
You gotta enslave each other, and then you can get a feudalism, and then you can get capitalism, and then you'll become like us, communists, good communists."
Do you think the aliens have been doing that? Do you think
maybe that's what that is
cavemen?
Probably what the reptilians did to us. I mean, look at the world. They're literally enslaving us. It's all in the name of getting us to communism.
Yeah, the aliens
the rich have
they
communism.
saw us being cavemen, then they decided, in order for us to be communists, first they need us to enslave each other. Then we need to develop feudalism.
You stupid buckies, you're sitting around in cages, in caves, in trees, lazing it down. What are you doing? You're never going to get anywhere this way. You get to enslave each other.
You can't do your empirical philosophy. You have to do dialectics.
Continuing the demand for bourgeois democratic republic when Tsardom and bourgeois society existed as, let us say, in Russia in 1905 was quite understandable, proper, and revolutionary demand. For at that time, a bourgeois republic would have meant a step forward, but now, under the conditions of the USSR, the demand for a bourgeois democratic republic would be a senseless and counter-revolutionary demand. For a bourgeois republic would be a retrograde step compared with the Soviet Republic. Well,
We're better than
you know what? He was historically right. A bourgeois republic was a step backwards in the Soviet Union. Not just politically,
and it
but
literally
materially. Happened. Yeah, they went back to the third world status after being right there, step behind from the first world.
Yeah.
So, historical prediction. Stalin, the next Nostradamus, maybe. Continuing, everything depends on the conditions, time, and place. I agree. It is clear that without such a historical approach to social phenomena, the existence and development of a science of history is impossible, for only such an approach saves the science of history from becoming a jumble of accidents and an agglomeration of most absurd mistakes. Further, if the world is in a state of constant movement and development, if the dying away of the world and the upwards of new is a law of development, then it is clear that there can be no immutable social systems, no eternal principles of private property and exploitation, no eternal ideas of subjugation of the peasant to the landlord, of the worker to the capitalist. I mean, they say this, but they never understand this, really. Because, this basically also denies, communism itself, won't be eternal. What can you think, would undo communism? Obviously, you're not supposed to be predicting the future, but there are structures which I think become increasingly more and more concrete, and one can see that there really isn't going to be much more that can be conceived, if at all conceived, of another kind of different relation. You can have older relations that reappear in new forms. But anyways, yeah. That's about it. He won't really say much of anything else. I just wanted same stuff that Trotsky was saying. Just goes to show you. These. They didn't really have a vastly different way of viewing the world from a abstract theoretical perspective. I mean, their abstract theory is the exact same as far as I see it, but the way they actually understood and practiced it was quite different. Except for Trotsky. Trotsky was a snake, and he never did anything worth anything.
Oh, he deserved the ice pick.
But alright, don't read Bordiga, don't read Stalin, don't listen to Anthony Fantano.
Why?
With that, we'll leave you there.
Why not?
Because, as you said,
Oh, don't listen to his political
not
views?
as we established, as Hyperion established earlier. If you listen to him, you're a reactionary.
Look at the comments section and tell me I'm wrong. Bye.